Welcome all to my channel. Welcome back to my channel. And today I'm going to do a collab with Thorne in my side. We're going to talk about a small little thing called the college chancellors fights to get rid of algebra because it's unfair to black people. And this is where I come in with Thorne inside because, well, some people would consider her a black person. Go ahead, take it away.
Yes, in fact, this is my collaboration with Mr. Modwain, and this is College Chancellor Fights to Get Rid of Algebra because it's unfair to black people. So once again, we're going to be covering more bigotry of low expectations, and how in trying to be diverse, people are yet again being racist as hell.
I don't understand this one though, because what I've been told is that at this point in time, SAT scores in America, black people already have a plus 250 bonus to their SAT scores. Is this correct?
Yes, it's, oh God, what is it called? Yes, okay. That is the word I was looking for. It's basically affirmative action when it comes to test scores. People of certain minority statuses, unless of course you're Asian, actually get a bump up in SAT scores. But we can't give, we can't give the Asians a bump up because they actually have test scores that are higher than both white people, black people, Hispanic people, everything. They get a minus 50-point deduction despite actually being minorities.
It's kind of weird though, because considering you already have affirmative action giving you a 250-point bonus, it seems that according to these college chancellors, black people still have a problem. Is this general or is this specific?
What do you mean by general or specific? Because generally, the whole idea that the college system has is that because Jim Crow existed, because slavery existed, that black people started out behind. But really what this is kind of saying is that African Americans are less capable of learning algebra for nebulous reasons that are actually starting to sound a little bit like, black folks are incapable of learning algebra, so let's just make college easier for them. And, it's kind of sounding like this chancellor thinks that the black people are stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is quite ridiculous.
It's kind of funny though, because this makes me think a little bit on that bullshit story that was going on before the elections on how Democrats were all against voter ID laws because black people couldn't get IDs. Can you remember that?
Yeah, and then there was some folks that were going through and asking black people if they had an ID or knew how to get one, and they were just looking at them like, what, do you think I'm stupid? Eloy Ortiz Oakley, I'm hoping I'm not butchering this name, Chancellor of California Community College System. Of course it's California. Sorry, I had to stop.
Yeah,
Eloy,
I have to admit, you read California Community and I read California Communist, and I'm sorry.
Eloy Ortiz Oakley, Chancellor of California Community College System, argued against forcing students in college to learn algebra. It's a civil rights issue, said Oakley. Basically, the argument is that if college was easier, more black people would have college degrees. Wow.
Yeah, and if winning the lottery was easier, we would have more millionaires.
If work were easy, I wouldn't be absolutely exhausted right now.
There is that. We used to have this saying that if my uncle had wheels and he would drive around on the rails, he would be a train.
Oh, that's so silly.
It is. But that's the problem with if. It's really silly. Yeah, more black people would have college degrees. Is this the case though? I mean, what's the main reason black people don't have college degrees, assuming that most black people don't? Is that even true though?
It's the gap is starting to close because of programs like this, but originally the reason was that Jim Crow was in fact a thing, and I think up until like the 1960s, there were many colleges that were allowed to simply just not take black people.
Okay.
So there is a historic precedent for this, but the thing is, these legal barriers have been removed. The
So
legal barriers don't exist anymore.
what do you think, as you yourself being a black woman, what do you think is one of the reasons that black people do not seem to go to college?
I'm actually mixed race. I'm mostly Hispanic, but I think I can still speak to this. I'm also married to a black man. But I would honestly say it's an income thing and possibly a lack of education thing, because a lot of African Americans do come from areas of the country that have poor education systems, as do many Hispanic people.
Okay, so the education system needs an overhaul.
Oh yeah, the America's education system is failing. There's a great many different problems, and I believe that on both sides of the aisle, there are politicians that are trying to put a blanket solution to the problem. And, you know, the country is just too big and the populations are too diverse for anyone's system to work.
Okay, well, I'm pretty straightforward. I mean, teaching algebra, it shouldn't be that difficult. I mean, people might find algebra difficult, but yeah, algebra isn't for everyone. Does that make
No.
sense, what I just said?
No, of course. I am actually horrifically bad at math. I don't understand algebra. I don't know what it is about it. I just can't wrap my head around the concepts of having letters in my math. But growing up, I grew up in a town that was somewhat racially diverse, and the folks around me that were having difficulty came from all different walks of life. So it doesn't really matter your skin color. Either you're good at stuff or you're not.
Yeah, no, but that's the point I was kind of making, because I'm great at the social sciences. It's my job. I'm crap at algebra. It's not my job. I don't care that I'm crap at algebra. So why? I mean, don't get me wrong. I've got my first degree, and I had to do some algebra in that one, and I scored sufficiently, but it will not be my job.
Basically, also what this kind of implies is that people that are of a minority status, again, except for Asian, are somehow less capable than folks who are white or Asian. And that's just kind of what I like to call bigotry of low expectations. I use it a lot. It's basically saying that someone of a certain skin color or ethnic background is less capable of people of other ethnic backgrounds, and we need to help them. And that in and of itself is kind of a form of racism.
Yeah, that is it's weird. I don't understand it, but especially if we look at high-profile Black Americans, for example. And I'm not taking Barack Obama. I could actually. I mean, he is a lawyer. Before he became a president, he was a lawyer. But if we look at, there have been Black scientists as well. I'm pretty sure they had to do algebra.
I mean, I think Barack Obama is probably the best example of how we don't have racism. We have had a black president.
But if we look at the algebra thing, I mean, they say this is a civil rights issue, but it's also something that plagues all Americans, particularly low-income Americans. So this is black and white.
I would very much like for this to be a little bit longer, because I'm betting that when they mean low-income Americans, a lot of times folks that write like this, they mean the urban poor, in which they mean Black and Hispanic Americans. Generally, sorry.
But there are lots of white poor people in America too, more so than black.
Statistically speaking, there are more extremely poor white people and there are extremely poor black people, but you have to understand, Modwain, that being white, they're still obviously privileged despite the fact that, you know, they live in trailer parks. In addition, most of the white poor live in rural areas, and rural students are often forgotten by the American education system, or at the very least, the liberal half of the United States, sadly.
Doesn't that make it worse?
I think it makes it worse. How would it not be worse? It's just like, oh, we're gonna take care of these particular types of students, and you know, you're already privileged. You know, you've never been oppressed in any way. We're just gonna ignore the fact that, you know, you have a single mom and you live in a trailer that smells like piss. We're gonna take care of these kids instead. Because you're the sorry, we're gonna take care of these kids instead because you're the wrong color.
See, now I understand more and more why there are movements growing to talk about racial issues, both on black and white side, but this isn't a racial issue. This is a poverty issue.
Huzzah. Yes, you basically just hit the nail on the head. It's not a race issue. It's not about black. It's not about white. It's about the fact that certain people have been poor for generations and continue to be poor and have poor education. Since a larger number of black folks have been poor, they have lower college attendance numbers. But it doesn't have anything to do with systemic racism anymore, not since the 1960s. Did that make any sense?
Yeah, to me it does, to be honest. But then it scares me even more that there are college chancellors who think that making a curriculum easier will change the problem of poverty.
It would be nice if everything was easier. Unfortunately, a lot of folks, especially folks in some lower income areas, are going to school for useless degrees. And
yeah. But that's the thing. Because now what they're doing is they're creating useless degrees. They're how do you call it? Inflating the value of a community college degree, or deflating it actually, by making it sound as if it's very important, but by deflating the value of it.
When I was graduating college, I ended up going to a community college first, and community colleges were kind of more meant for trade schools. You're going into something like an electrician or a nurse, something around those lines. Now, community colleges are like, you can get African American studies, women's studies, liberal arts, things like that. What I call the useless degrees.
Yeah, yeah, but they get paid.
Which is not to say that they're totally useless, but the thing is, you don't need a ton of women's studies majors. You don't need a ton of African studies majors. These are basically majors in which you can only ever get a job in academia, and there's a very limited amount of those.
Mm-hmm. But to reach academia, you need to have a certain scholarly adaptation. You have to be able to learn and teach.
And also, in the case of the more scholarly kind of majors, you know, philosophy, things like that, you need money. You need to have been independently wealthy to begin with, because the only way that you're going to get a job at some of the higher colleges is if you put all of your time into study. And the only way that you can put all of your time into that study is to be independently wealthy or know people.
Yeah. So how will it help black people in America if they remove algebra to reach positions like that? Personally, I would think it wouldn't.
It won't. The thing is, if everybody can get into everything, if everyone is special, no one is special. And part of this is, there's been a general movement to like kind of crap on the janitors, you know, the nurses, some of the middle of the road professions, to the point where everybody wants to be the CEO. And I think that that's also kind of a problem with the United States, and to a lesser extent, maybe other parts of the world, that everybody wants to be on top, but they don't realize that not everybody can be, and society is always going to need people on every tier of society, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being a nurse. There's nothing wrong with being a teacher. There's nothing wrong with being the garbage man.
I know there's nothing wrong with being a nurse. I basically am.
But yeah, and
no, but I understand what you're saying. So people should recognize that the positions they hold, whether there are positions higher than theirs, doesn't mean that the position they hold themselves are bad.
correct.
I mean,
yeah.
not everyone can be a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. Some people just have to sweep the roads. And if
Yeah.
you're happy sweeping the road, then there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Is
There's
this
nothing wrong with blue collar work.
There's nothing wrong with blue collar work. But is this part of the problem that a large group of people tend to not want to fit those roles anymore?
Maybe it's part of the thing that some of the folks coming from these types of backgrounds, this is what their dad did, this is what their dad's dad did, and they just want to do something that's so much better than that and just to really stand out. And in the previous generation, there's been a push that everyone is special, everybody can be the president, but also that if you don't, you're not special. You're just like everybody else. And to be just like everybody else is literally a fate worse than death. You have to be unique. You have to stand out. And there's this push and this drive for it. And I really think that that's kind of hurting people, especially folks in minority communities that just don't want to do what their forebearers did. There's even a saying among folks in the Black community, I'm not my grandparents, which basically means that I'm not just going to sit by and be the quiet Black person that accepts the status quo as it is.
Well, that's kind of funny, though, because we know, statistically speaking, Black families were more intact and more secure during the Jim Crow era than they are now.
Yes, and that's not to say that Jim Crow was correct, because it wasn't.
No, absolutely not in favor of Jim Crow. I mean, Jim Crow was a terrible thing, a thing brought to America by the Democrats, mind you, but never mind that. No, it was a terrible thing. But even during this terrible period, the Black society, the Black community, was a more stable community than it is now. Do you understand? Or do you think I'm exaggerating?
In some ways stable, but in other ways kind of fractured and broken and a little bit kind of trapped by Jim Crow. Because here's the thing, during Jim Crow, if you were Black and you wanted to, even in some areas, you couldn't even be a freaking secretary if you were a woman. Mm-hmm. You had to be the housekeeper. Like, you were literally barred from those jobs. And so the Black community was stopped from rising above. And I think part of the reason these chancellors are saying that Black folks need a step up is because of Jim Crow, because of slavery, that they were held down for too long. And now, now we want a leg up because we want to get to the same place. And I really believe that they only want them to get to the same place, because that's starting to be, it's starting to be more of the idea of, nope, it's our turn. We want to be on top now.
So they don't want to be at the same place. They want to be on top.
Yeah, that's what I kind of get from the Black Lives Matter movement. The whole idea of, you've held us down for so long, now we're going to step on you. We're going to do the exact same frickin' thing as Jim Crow. We're going to do the exact same frickin' thing as the slave owners. And it kind of makes me ill, because y'all should know better. This happened to your ancestors. You should know better. This is a terrible thing that should never be repeated.
Well, there is that. I not want to go into slavery, to be honest, because slavery, it's one of my favorite pet projects, so to speak. Slavery wasn't just a Black thing, and not all slave owners were white. There were white slaves and there were black slave owners as well. But beside that point, Jim Crow laws were terrible, and it's a good thing that America did move away from them. It took them time, but they got there. It's wrong that certain people seem to want to reinstate them. Now there are white supremacists like people that want to reinstate them, where the whites are on top and the blacks are the ones to be suppressed. There are people on the black side who want to oppress the white people. It doesn't make sense. The whole thing about African American. Why are you an African American? I mean, I know of people who are from Polish descent that live in America. They're not Polish Americans, they're Americans. If the Tree of Logic once said this, I don't see myself as African American. I'm American. Fuck you if you think different.
I don't actually think that there's anything wrong with both. My mother came to the United States from Germany when she was 3 years old. She considers herself a German American, as does all of my aunts and uncles and my cousins. But here's the thing, they always consider themselves American first. And I think in some cases people consider like their skin color first. I'm Hispanic American, but I'm Hispanic first. I'm Black American, but I'm Black first. And it's very divisive.
Yeah. Well, it's what, what's his face? Morgan Freeman said, stop talking about it.
Yeah, it is. It's stop talking about it. That's what even what my husband said. He's like, I'm with Morgan Freeman. I don't want a Black History Month. I just want, you know, Black figures to be in history class, and we just stop talking about that.
And there are some Black inventors. Hell, everyone makes fun of, what's his name? I think it was Carver, the guy that invented peanut butter.
Yeah, George Washington Carver invented peanut butter, amongst several other things. There are other inventors as well. The first
I just take this one on purpose because people seem to make the invention of peanut butter something to ridicule. But it was a great invention because people with certain food allergies, and I know you can have peanut allergies as well, but there are other food allergies. People with lactose food allergies were severely lacking certain nutrients. And because of peanut butter, they were available to them.
Yeah, it was a great invention.
It was a great invention. People underestimate it.
Did you know that the first female millionaire in the United States was a Black woman?
I'm going to say Oprah Winfrey. I'm probably wrong, but I didn't know.
You're very wrong. She sold hair products. Give me a moment and let me look her up. The first female millionaire period in the United States, self-made millionaire, was Ms. Madam C.J. Walker. She is famous for selling hair products.
Wow.
It was basically products that were used to straighten hair.
And this happened during the James Crow law times.
This happened before Jim Crow.
Wow.
She actually passed away in May. She passed away May 25th, 1919.
I wasn't aware.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to say I'm amazed, but it's not that I'm really amazed. I mean, I'm not surprised that a Black person could reach such a potential position. I mean, to say I'm amazed would almost sound as if I'm truly amazed. It's not that I'm amazed, I just didn't know.
Yeah, even despite all of the racism against Black people of the time, Miss Walker was still able to, you know, basically rise to the top and come up with a business plan and a product that everybody wanted. This wasn't a product that was just sold to Black women. White women bought it too. It basically straightened hair, and then she diversified and made more products. This was a woman that was born to former slaves.
Yeah.
And she went from being the child of former slaves to a millionaire. So don't tell me that Black people are too slow to handle algebra. That is such crap.
I'm curious what she would think if she would read the article. if you would be told that black people can't learn algebra. I'm curious what she would say. I have a strong feeling she might not agree.
I have a strong feeling that she might be extremely upset to like see this state of things.